I continued with similar subjects and specialized meditations aimed at relaxation of the mind and body. It was the same at Malak and Edita's whenever I conducted meditations. Margaret provided a very damaging negative input against my person based on her ungrounded disappointments, and yet still desirous to be closely involved with me. However, due to her opposition towards me for spending time with a woman from the Philippines, she was disillusioned, as was evident from her unique expressions. Malak was also a Sai Baba devotee, like Margaret, and therefore whatever was discussed between the two of them had some bearing. Margaret was apparently very pleased with what she discovered when she attended my group, and was willing to continue. Malak constantly pressurized me to marry Margaret, for she was a good woman and was devoted to Sai Baba. Edgar, on the other hand, always claimed that something about that lady was not quite right, but Malak could not accept any opposition to her way of thinking. She had to be the big I am. I felt there was need to explain myself as to why I was not interested in what she saw fit for me. When Edita also desired to join that group, all hell broke loose. She told Malak discreetly that we were sexually involved and were intending to get married soon. She claimed that her son resembled Suren more than her former husband. Upon this, Malak interrogated me once more, asking me when I was planning to marry Edita, for it was probably the best thing that could happen to me, obliging me to explain a few home truths. Instead of trying to understand me, she kept advising that I should get married with Edita, although she would prefer to see Margaret living with me as husband and wife. I was extremely stressed out. I could not understand Malak's concern, behaving as if she was my superior or my mother. Again, I chose to keep quiet and unstirred, even if they chose to jump up and down with anger, because I was not going to follow anybody's dictates, but rather follow my own heart. As a result, Malak once again decided that I should conduct my group elsewhere, for they already had a Sai Baba group, and that was apparently the best for them. I suppose one could easily guess why, but another member and his mother, having noticed the difference, as they put it, decided to continue with my meditation group at their premises, even suggesting that when I arrived at Bentley train station, somebody would meet me and take me to their home in Center Road. Interestingly, Malak and Edgar later wanted to continue with my meditations. That gentleman, a practicing accountant, was now very happy about the situation, and his mother, a very devout Christian, thought she had finally met a true and genuine teacher. They were all extremely enthused about my input when we conducted a wholesome discussion group in a New Age sense and in the quantum way of thinking. Since they were paying a substantial fee to the person conducting Sai Baba-related meditations at Malak's, they preferred me to conduct the group for free, but would occasionally pay me a small amount of collected donations. I had a feeling that because I was doing what was requested of me, some people could not grasp the importance of paying something for the services they received, probably considering all the time spent with me not being as necessary as the other person's input. In other words, some could not value my services for they had apparently been voluntary. They could not see that I also needed the means to look after myself. Perhaps considering me as a very wealthy individual, needing no income like the other gurus. However, I was unable to generate enough income while living in Chelsea Heights, due to circumstances forced upon me. Although I completed the painting, Bounty Hunter, the people who initially commissioned me to paint it had cold feet due to their financial traumas. I received nothing for it, although they had agreed on the price originally suggested, and that made me feel completely devastated. I suppose I should not have trusted people, for it was really tragic, especially when my own expenses needed to be paid as well as what Edita relentlessly demanded. I did not know how to squeeze blood out of stones. Edita had to pay her own debts, and most reluctantly accepted the idea that I was unable to generate an income, as I once could when living in St. Kilda before my move to Chelsea Heights. Although she had a regularly paid job at the Australia Post in the city, she still expected that I pay expenses which were not mine, and I was certainly not going to steal or borrow any money. During the days of calm, Edita decided to join my group again after a short break, and, as she said, she was hearing good things about those meditations I conducted. I could not reject her wanting to join in. Having enjoyed these sessions, she decided to visit Malak for their specialized private meetings. Again she spoke of us being very closely related, emphasizing that we were enjoying sex together. As usual, Malak, being a very judgmental individual and panic merchant, took this in a very wrong way. I wondered if Edita did what she wanted all along on purpose. My indirect psychoanalysis on professional grounds, one could see how disappointed Malak was, remembering she had to be in control of other people's lives. Obviously, there was a psychological issue here. According to her way of thinking, as one knew from her friends, apparently I needed to follow a form of celibacy without any sex partner in my life, otherwise I was a pretender. Maybe she thought of me needing to be a priest, if not like one of those Indian gurus expected to live without a partner, ignoring the fact that some were performing truly sinful deeds behind closed doors, which were openly known all around the world, but creating the impression of living a more decent life. Although she originally expected me to get married with Margaret, having discovered my allegedly close relationship with Edita, Malak, in her wishful thinking, formed the idea that perhaps I should be involved with Edita, but seeing nothing was happening towards fulfillment of her wishes, she grew very cold towards me. In compliance with her demands, certain members of the group did not want to see me anymore. I was thought of as being an immoral creature in her eyes. Seeing only a tableau painted by Margaret, Edita, and somebody else I will be telling you about soon. It seemed that my ex-wife and her close associates were not alone in thinking that I had to be someone who played around with other women and was immoral. Were they judging me with my looks, my origins, or the race they thought I belonged to? If they would only have listened to my stories, they would have discovered a totally different person in me. But they have all been extraordinarily judgmental, without any reason, forming their opinions of people according to their dreams and separatist viewpoints. I know also that their behavior towards or against others remains just the same. Their kind of attitude against others is indeed soul-destroying. However, when those who are being judged no longer associate with them, allegedly those claiming to be the only righteous ones create all kinds of fault in their imagination to justify their own wisdom, which they themselves may or may not realize ever existed. I was extremely stressed about my own circumstances, for if I had not moved to Chelsea Heights, I would still be generating reasonable amounts of income on commissioned works and teaching while living in St. Kilda. Everything was looking good in that regard. Although I did not try to talk about this issue with her any longer, Edita continued finding faults with my person without consideration of my educational and cultural background, only declaring her own supremacy in all things. She tended to argue on completely trivial issues in regard to her emotional needs, constantly complaining about everybody else. She continued asking me to predict if she was going to live with someone who could love and cherish her, or was she going to remain all alone in her mature age. Obviously, realizing something important was broken to pieces, she was very frustrated. My unwanted but minor arguments with Edita greatly saddened me. She was relentless. Repeating myself, I resorted to remaining silent most of the time. Whenever Christina from ABC Radio or Margaret from Sydney phoned me, Edita showed extreme jealousy, sometimes criticizing me for wasting her money by spending long periods of time on the telephone. However, I was not. One evening, after her arrival home, she tried to chastise me in regard to her brightest star, her son Robert, and his current attitude of the ugliest kind against me. She said Robert would never behave the way he did towards me if I did not say something nasty and hurtful to him. In total honesty, she could not see the negative effects of his attitude towards me, as if I was about to replace his father. He was artificially friendly and at the same time resented me, although I preferred to remain as a family friend. Edita accused me of being a bad role model to him, for he was deliberately nasty to me, and that was allegedly most unusual for him. Whenever there was any chance, I attempted to teach him painting, and he enjoyed it. However, his strange behavior towards me was interpreted as him being very friendly with me as far as Edita was concerned. Obviously, she interpreted her precious angel's undesirable behavior as his absolute joy in my presence. I tried to help him how to stand tall when he had to face a few bullies at school and had been complaining about it. When he had a very inflamed appendix and needed urgent hospitalization while his mother was at work, I gladly assisted him cope with the excruciating pain, and at the hospital stayed with him, sitting by his bedside after his operation all night through, in his mother's absence, although he was not my child. His father visited him the next morning. Robert had many reasons to be a little friendlier towards me, but under his mother's influence he remained otherwise. I considered him once as if he was my own child, often looking after him when his mother was very busy. I would help any child and anyone if there was need without expecting any favors in return. A little smile would be just enough. Being told I must have said ugly things to hurt the child was devastating. Furthermore, repeating myself, I never wanted to take his father's place, as Edita desired, and made sure my position was understood correctly. I had experienced complete rejection from my own children, under the indoctrination and dictates of their mother, whom I once loved, but who became bent with a form of reality Jehovah's Witnesses have inflicted her, hating me along with everything else in the world, and therefore I decided never to become part of a system like that. I always preferred, as I do today, to be friendly with everyone, smiling and helping when there was need. I believe many people who do not belong to cultist movements feel that way towards me too, for they can see that I am a friendly person, loving every human living on the face of the earth. And children always smile at me, for they feel deep inside their hearts that I would never hurt anyone. One evening, immediately after Edita arrived home, using a few ungainly words towards me in regard to Robert's attitude towards my person, while I was talking to Christina on the telephone, she shouted, "You are the lowest of the lowest of the lowest kind of a man." Robert kept giggling hysterically, and I looked directly into her eyes, saying nothing, electing to show no emotions, and keeping completely silent. I did not have any food that evening, and went into my room for one last time. I started to pack up my things after disconnecting my sound equipment, picking my paint brushes and canvases. Edita kept cooking as per usual, and after they had their evening meal, watched their chosen television programs, and behaved as if nothing had happened. I had not even been offered a cup of tea, but that was fine, as I always stood on my own 2 feet anyway. Even long after they were asleep, in the dead of the night, I continued packing. In the morning I found myself waking up on the chair I had sat on for a brief moment due to exhaustion. Mother and son already gone, I organized a storage company to pick up my belongings, but alas, they could only make it in the mid-afternoon or later. That gave me a chance to check if I had forgotten anything. About 4:30 in the afternoon, transport arrived, and I started to load the truck with 2 people from their company. I even organized my only faithful companion, my dearest puss Bilinki, to be accommodated for a while. By the time we had carried the last items into the truck, Edita, with her wonderful son, arrived. Seeing the truck in the backyard about to drive off, she once more shouted at me, asking what was going on. Robert, wandering from one room to the other, told his mother, "I think Pops is going away." I looked into her eyes, directly, but kept cool, and calmly, but firmly said to her only this: "You do not deserve to have the lowest of the lowest of the lowest kind of a man at your home." At that moment Robert shouted, "Mom, he did not take anything of you. My computer is still here." She said softly, "But you can at least leave the big portrait of the boy with me." She knew that I would never leave that special portrait of the child I had drawn in Perth with anybody, and pretended that I had not heard her. "Maybe you should leave your other paintings with us." I already had, and left Edita's place for one last time, hoping that I would never see her again. I needed to have all my household goods, furniture, musical instruments, and piano stored until I was housed. I could only wish that there was suitable housing for me very soon, and would keep myself very private from then on, giving my new address to no one. But I received no income at this stage. Strangely, I was informed that I could not even apply for social welfare payments for the unemployed until I started to make some money again. One of the important criteria they demanded was a permanent residence before offering any assistance. Imagine having no income, no money, and you need to apply for such benefits while you have no known address to call home. It was going to be a catch-22 if I had to be housed before applying for any help. After my belongings had been stored that evening, I had no place to go and put my head down, and transport was not as frequent during the night as it is these days. I decided to take my very first walk on the empty streets after leaving Edita's, and in the morning I was going to visit a few real estate agencies. I took my chances and started to walk, hoping I was not going to encounter criminally minded individuals or police officers who would question me about what I did for a living or where I lived, for I felt really embarrassed. I simply had to spend time on the streets until the morning, and after my early breakfast, probably at one of the McDonald's family restaurants, I could visit a few agencies. I walked slowly, very tired and devastated after all the packing and loading the storage company's truck, but I did not regret leaving Edita's. Indeed, walking in the empty alleyways, even just living on the streets and starving, was far better than living under her roof. I was convinced that she had no human feelings of sadness for what devastation she created. Alas, I was on the receiving end, yet wished her a good and restful night in my thoughts. I was having a mental conversation with my invisible friends as I kept walking in the dead of the night. I was certain that my ex-wife and her unfortunate children would probably consider it as my deserving. The first real estate agency I approached suggested that I should call in the next morning for possible good news about a small dwelling at the back of a house in Springvale, close to a primary school. I wondered what I was going to do until then, and decided to check other agencies in the vicinity. One suggested that I should go and see a dwelling in Springvale. Full of hope, I went there, only to discover what a derelict place it was. In fact, even an animal would find it difficult to settle there. One could literally see the outside world from the corners of every room, and the loose flooring. They suggested to take it or leave it, and one even advised me that my kind of people were very hard to house. I still wonder what was meant by that. A few other houses, units, and flats I looked at were leased for only a short time. Sadly, I could not speak of my ordeal to anyone. The next morning, again after wandering the streets during the night, for I could not do any banking yet, and therefore unable to stay in a hotel room, I visited the first agency, but they suggested I should try them first thing one morning during the following week. I still had no money in my account, as it was mistakenly locked. I was having the worst time of my life. However, I was not going to give up, even if I had to live on the streets for a while. For I had done it before, when my unfortunate marriage ended with Magda. My supposed family had no idea what misery they had created for me, only forever complaining about my person being allegedly evil. If they heard my story, I was so sure that they would still consider me a liar. They could only shun and forget what devastation they have caused under the alleged banner of righteousness. It was their tradition.